I want to talk about a favorite tool of mine, more high-level tool than this epistemological stuff that I describe with more certainty. This is a more flexible thing, open to various kinds of interpretation. But basically, I view words and language as chemical reactions. Words are like molecules. Sometimes it's a string of words that's like the molecule. And since you can use words to describe uh, human behavior, then human behavior can be like molecules. So, some ideas and the words that describe them are, more volatile than others. Like the idea, hey, I like green. I could say, oh, that's always true. I always like green. But really, it only applies, I only ever apply that as a truth, in very narrow circumstances where it pertains. Mostly that idea doesn't react, with other ideas. If I express my love of green in the middle of a conversation about politics, people are not necessarily going to think that relates, probably. Whereas an idea like sexism, if I express that, well, that's very reactive. And it pertains to labor issues and therefore property, to war. It relates to medical issues. It's very reactive, sexism. Okay. And I don't mean just because it's objectionable. I mean, human rights. Human rights is also a concept that applies and is very reactive, in that it has a chemical reaction. Doesn't mean it's going to be explosive. No, not all chemical reactions are explosive. Chemical reactions are all over the place. Okay, so this to me explains certain kinds of things. Like, for one, sometimes you find an idea that's like a toxic chemical. If this idea is this toxic, and yet it persists. Why does it persist? You might even find that it breaks down, like racism, toxic chemical, and really it breaks down over generations naturally as the children marry each other and eliminate the differences. And yet it gets self-sustained somehow, or somebody's injecting energy into it. Well, to me, this is, explained in a chemical metaphor, just metaphorically explained, There's a lot more technical things you would look at if you're studying the psychology of it. But it's because conversations, and therefore things that can be described as narratives and in language, are chemical systems. And these toxic ideas often are sustained by the fact that they're a part of a chemical system. And that chemical system produces something or is somehow self-sustaining. But often it produces something for the people that run that chemical system of ideas, this idea system. And they keep getting what they want from that system. So they're putting in the energy. And this can sustain something that otherwise seems like it would dissipate. Some idea that doesn't seem strong enough to keep surviving. Some idea that is toxic and you don't understand why anybody would put up with it once it's known to be toxic. Well, it plays a role in these chemical systems. Okay. If you have something like a conversation, this is a chemical system, so it has a reality separately from whatever the content of it is. So, for example, we've been discussing, what's a good example? We've been discussing metaphysics for thousands of years. There's a conversation of that. And one way to view that is that we're doing some sort of information processing on the idea, and we keep improving it. It looks cyclic, but the conversation changes, so maybe it's more of a spiral. It's hard to tell which changes are superficial and which might be significant. And sometimes people find it easier just to say, none of them are significant. But when analyzed as a chemical system, you see, there's a chemical system and something that survives 1,000 years. That's an interesting chemical process. It may be self-generating like life. It may be just a long persisting process. But that chemical process has its own reality. The people that are arguing against each other are actually part of the same system for thousands of years. It's a different perspective than thinking, these two sides have battled for thousands of years over this. To realize, no, they're part of a system that works together. The one needs the other. They're sustained in this system. And sometimes when you see that, you can step aside and see that you've misunderstood the chemical because you only understand it within this one system. As philosophers, this is what we're trying to do, is to extract and isolate certain chemicals and understand how they react. To break things down like chemists do so that we can have a periodic table and the 1,000 different things can turn out to just be combinations of a few dozen different things. These are the kinds of discoveries that we're hoping for. And when we apply our knowledge, we'll be applying it like those that apply chemistry. We'd be trying to make some reactions very energetic to get energy from them. Other reactions quite the opposite, calm down the situation, repair something. The chemical reaction perhaps removes an inflammation. It heals something rather than creates a major excitation. This is really, I believe that, in a day-to-day life, the most useful ideas are just metaphors that we find that help us understand things that may seem counterintuitive. New models where something counterintuitive, becomes more intuitive. So, yeah, what do you think about that? I also think personalities are like chemicals. I think it works pretty good.